It was supposed to be the ultimate spring break. 4 girls, no parents, one luxury private yacht, and the beautiful waters of the Caribbean. Until it wasn't. Between Key West and Grand Cayman, a young heiress disappears. It's Dead Below Deck, a thriller full of twists and turns till the very end. I'm Ann Bocock, and welcome to Between the Covers. My guest is former journalist and award-winning author Jan Gangsey. Her latest book, her second in the young adult genre, is a thriller. But it's more than a mystery. It's certainly a look at the rich and famous and our obsession with that lifestyle. The book is Dead Below Deck. Welcome, Jan.
Hi, Ann. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you are here. And before we get into the story, I am curious, where did the inspiration for this story come from?
So actually, the inspiration came from a cruise that my family and I took right before the pandemic hit, and very shortly before the pandemic hit. I guess you could say it was my lockdown book. We came back from our cruise, and I think probably 2 or 3 weeks later, the entire world as we knew it changed. School got canceled, my kids were at home, and I found myself just thinking about, wow, wouldn't it be great to be back out on the water in the middle of the sea with no idea what was waiting for us on shore? And that kind of launched the idea of, okay, what if you had this group of girls who went on a trip and something terrible happens, so it's not the same. The trip at the end is not how it started, and it just launched from there.
Perfect inspiration. Now, the yacht details, you nailed this. We are not talking your weekend boat for the lake. This is a multi-million-dollar yacht. Now, my hope is that you had to research that part.
I wish I actually had gotten to spend some time on a mega yacht. I did not. That came a little bit more from Google and watching, episodes of Below Deck and just researching that way.
Good research, because I have to say, as a reader, I felt like I was part of this trip. So excellent, very good.
Thank you.
No spoilers, but I would love it if you would set it up by reading from, and I believe it's page 2, which gives the breaking news report that'll tell us where we are in this story.
Absolutely. So it starts out with a breaking news alert on April 16th at 10:08 a.m., an unfolding tragedy at sea. We have just learned in an exclusive report that Giselle Haverford, the 18-year-old daughter of Senator and likely presidential candidate Robert Haverford and stepdaughter of popular lifestyle blogger Brittany Michelle Haverford, has gone missing from the family yacht, the Escape. Giselle Haverford reportedly went overboard under suspicious circumstances late last night or early this morning after departing Key West, Florida. The yacht is currently en route to Grand Cayman, where our sources tell us at least one passenger is expected to be taken into custody. More on this story as it develops.
More on this story as it develops. Thank you for reading that passage.
Sure.
Can you tell us, there are 4 girls on this yacht. They go to the same boarding school.
Yes.
So first of all, why is it, and it is, why are boarding schools such a good place for a mystery?
I think part of it, especially when you're writing a young adult story, you're removed from parents to a degree that you're not if you're not at a boarding school. So I think that's a little bit of it. Then you also layer in as you were mentioning, the privilege, and you have these extremely wealthy students. You also have scholarship students. So you have a mix of these people coming from different backgrounds, but all set against this backdrop of something that maybe most of us just kind of dream of a little. What's it like to go to an exclusive boarding school?
And they do. They go to one of the top boarding schools in the country. Tell me who these girls are.
Okay, so our main characters are Maggie Mitchell. She is the new person in the friend group who doesn't actually live at the boarding school. She commutes in every day from a neighboring state. The school is set in New Hampshire, and Maggie's driving in every day from Vermont. It's a little bit mysterious as to what she's doing there. Obviously, that gets revealed a little bit as the story goes on. Then we have Giselle Haverford, who is the heiress that is the other main character in the book. And she is very, very wealthy. Her father is, old money politician, probably will become president. He's currently a senator. Her mother has passed away, and it's been about 1.5 years since she died. And she was from Miami. She grew up, she was very wealthy, but with the money came from her father came from Cuba and founded a chain of grocery stores, Hispanic grocery stores. So she's kind of got this dual aspect to her in her personality and her background, where she has her father, who's this old money, and her mother, who was the new money. So just interesting dynamics for her. Then we have Vivian, who is a student from New York, as well as Emmy, who has been Giselle's best friend since they were young children.
4 girls,
yes,
all different personalities, and we're talking teenage. It's already interesting. The book is billed as young adult. Now, anyone who loves a mystery is going to love this book. There are twists, there are turns. I didn't see the reveal at the end, so bravo, because I always like to see if I can find that. The writing, it's very clever in your crafting, because it's told, I guess, in reverse chronological order, but with other elements. Tell me about writing reverse chronological order.
Sure. So I love playing with narrative structures, and this particular story, when it came to me, I think from the very beginning, I saw it unfolding in reverse, where we actually start with that moment of the news report where Giselle is missing, she's gone overboard. Basically, it opens with our main character, Maggie, being confined to her stateroom because they've just seen video that shows that Maggie pushed Giselle off the yacht the night before. So then it just tracks back from there. It starts at day 5 of the trip. And instead of chapters, I headlined each section as, by the day of the trip, the location of the yacht, and the time. So you're kind of watching the yacht move back as it ticks back from their almost arrival in Grand Cayman, going back to their port stop in Key West, and back to their port stop in the Bahamas, and then back to their departure in Long Island. So it gave me a bit of a framework, because I think reverse chronology can get a little confusing if you're not oriented. So for me, that was something that kept it oriented as we worked backwards.
Reverse chronologically, but also a short time span.
5 days.
In 5 days. You do add other elements that were very clever. A journal, you have police interrogations, news bulletins. Tell me about that.
Sure. So the journal entries come from Giselle. The backwards narrative comes from Maggie, from her perspective, as you kind of figure out what led her to that final day of where she allegedly pushed Giselle overboard. Giselle's journal entries start at the beginning of the school year when Maggie joined the group, and then they lead up to the departure. So while one is working backwards, one is working forwards, and then at the end, that's where they all sort of wrap together and come back to the present day and bring the conclusion. And
it works
Thank
seamlessly.
You.
And it's what you're saying. I'm thinking, wow, somebody's going to go, that's very confusing. No, it's not. It makes perfect sense. Did you always know this is how I'm going to craft this story?
I did. From the very beginning, the backwards narrative just seemed to fit the story. And I think when we were talking about that, coming back from a cruise and coming back to COVID, basically hitting the world shortly after, there was this little part of my mind that was going, I wish I had a rewind button. I wish I had a rewind button. And I think part of that is what Maggie's feeling at the end of the story. She just wishes she had a rewind button and she could go back to the very beginning and and go about things the right way. So it fit. Like, that was also to reflect Maggie's desire to rewind.
And no spoilers,
Yeah.
but if I was Maggie, I would have wanted to hit that rewind
Yes,
button too.
absolutely.
In my mind, mysteries and thrillers are the perfect conduit for exploring social issues.
Right.
Do you agree?
Absolutely. I think that they are. I think they give you you get to amplify those feelings and those, concerns about social issues in a different way. You have the contrast of, not to be too spoilery, but of Maggie and Giselle and their backgrounds and why they're there and how those two backgrounds kind of come to clash. And obviously when that happens, it generally doesn't result in people getting pushed off yachts.
Not usually.
No.
I mean, Giselle, as you said, she's a celebrity.
Exactly.
She has a billionaire mother, father seeking the highest political ambition that you could possibly have. So as a writer, what do you think about a life of privilege on this scale? How does this make for such a good story?
I think we all like to imagine it a little bit, right? We like to envision what that would be like to live that lifestyle. Maybe we also like to see the fact that, okay, the people behind that, they're human, they have problems, maybe they have everything, but maybe it's not that great. They still suffer, they still have sadness and issues.
It's opening the curtain,
right?
And
right.
as a writer, you get to show us what is behind the curtain. Jan, there's also another storyline, and it has to do with PTSD.
Yes.
The aftermath of being in combat, and not only how it affects the veteran, but you show us how it affects
the family.
Talk about including that in this book.
That was something for me that was very, very important. I'm actually married to a former military member who did serve in the Army and the Coast Guard. I have a lot of friends in the military community, and I've seen firsthand what PTSD can do to the family members, and it doesn't just simply affect the veteran. And also sometimes how there isn't the support that you expect out there to help people, at least, especially with the extended family. And for the character who experiences this, it drives a lot of her motivation and where she's coming from and what she's trying to do to help her family. And I just feel like it's a very important topic to at least touch on.
That it is. I'd never actually thought about the lack of support for the family,
right.
as well as the person who had been in combat.
Right, and it's a lot of it is being willing to seek help, which also can become an issue for folks that are struggling, but they don't feel comfortable going out to seek help, and that reverberates with the family too.
The main characters, as you said, Giselle and Maggie, polar opposite circumstances, but they're both teenage girls. So as a writer, how do you get inside the head of a teenage girl and make it authentic to your readers?
Right. It does help being the mother of a couple of teenagers, so I do spend a lot of time around teens. I try to draw on some of my own experiences and memories. I think all of us, in a way, still have a little teenager rattling around in there that we can draw from. So a combination of experiences. I do read a lot of young adult literature, watch a lot of television shows featuring young characters. So I think immersing yourself in that world does help.
Did you also have to immerse yourself into social media, because we have influencers and these girls and your writing, you had to be really in tune to get that element right, because for this genre, if you don't get it right, they will let you know.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, definitely helpful to have a teenage child that you can bounce things off of a little bit.
When you're writing a novel that has this many twists and turns, is the challenge not revealing too much too soon?
Yes, absolutely. You don't want people to get to the end and see the conclusion and go, what? Because there were no hints, but you don't want them to get there and say, oh, I knew that since page 1. So it is, you have to pick and choose what little bits you reveal, and Hopefully when people see, I think some of the reveals, people will go, oh yeah, I kind of figured that one. But a couple of them, I hope that people will say, oh, and then look back and go, oh, now I see it.
Yeah,
you know, where the little clues were dropped.
It's that oh moment.
Yes.
Who was the most fun character to develop?
Oh, I have to say it's really a toss-up between both Maggie and Giselle. I really enjoyed writing both of them. I actually wound up enjoying Giselle more than I expected to, just getting in her head a little bit and trying to think about what her motivations were for doing things.
You took a course, I think it was DIA,
Yes.
Defense Intelligence Agency program. Sounds like spy school.
It was
what-
basically.
okay.
Yeah, it was fascinating. So we were assigned to, my husband was a defense attaché, so one of the requirements was we both had to go through this DIA attaché training, and they taught us so many things. Like we learned, you know, they took us to a French restaurant, we learned which forks to use and all the fancy stuff and how to dress for embassy functions, and then they take us out to a shooting range so we could practice shooting. We had to, you know, practice defensive, like if we got attacked, like how to defend ourselves. One of the funniest things they did was they put a little sticker on the back of your car, and you have to drive around the DC area with this sticker that identifies you as a member of this program, meaning that various people are going to trail you, just like you see in movies when they're trailing like spies in other countries. So they taught us how to deal with that, and that was one of the most fascinating things to me, because you watch a movie, right, and you see people getting tailed, and they're like looking behind them, and they're trying to figure out how to evade them. And the big thing was, they said, no, you don't look behind you. You pretend you don't even see them, and you have to get all the details and then report it back to the embassy, and not try to. But you don't go where you're going if you're going somewhere like top secret.
Did you get a good grade on that?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was funny because they would show us, like when people did it wrong, you know, that their eyes would be like looking up in the little rear view mirror. They would show us film in school. They'd be like, this person, mm-mm.
You had said that your husband was a Coast Guard
Yes.
officer. Did he critique any of the maritime parts of this book?
I did check a few things with him just to make sure that, you know, I wasn't too far off base in terms of search and rescue. He did coordinate actually in South Florida. He was stationed in Key West and Miami and coordinated search and rescue down here.
So that helped a little bit.
That helped a little bit, definitely.
Jan, navigating the young adult publishing world. Okay, this is a tough crowd to please. What's the secret sauce? How do you go about creating a story that actually will resonate with young adults?
Ooh, that is a very good question. I think you need to be relatable to the things that they're interested in and care about. And I feel like you shouldn't be super preachy. I don't think that people, the teenagers want to be told, this is good, this is bad. They want to see characters that they can identify with to a certain degree, or that they aspire to, or that they just find interesting. So, you know, I think the main thing is not being incredibly preachy with work, but just giving them something that's fun and entertaining.
What's the writing process like for you when you're creating a new book?
So typically, I don't super outline, but I like to have a bit of a roadmap of where I'm headed with something, and then I sit down and start drafting. I kind of liken it to plugging a destination into a GPS. Like with this story, I knew exactly how I wanted it to end. I knew what that twist would be. So that was my GPS destination, and I knew mainly how I wanted to get there. But once I start writing, it's sort of like when you head out on a road trip, it's like, ooh, look, detour for donuts, detour for, you know, got to go over here and try this. So, you know, there are places that your characters take you that you might not expect.
What makes a good story?
What makes a good story? I think it should make you feel something. You know, I think that's the main, to me, the main reason for art in general. You should feel something at the end of it, you either surprised, or you feel emotional, or you're you know, love, or it should bring out some type of emotion in you.
When you're not writing, when you don't have the author hat on, what kind of books do you gravitate to for yourself?
Oh, I read a lot of thrillers, actually. I love thrillers, and I do read a lot of young adult. Probably those are the two biggest genres that I read.
And young adult itself is a big genre. Speaking of, your debut book was also a young adult book.
Right.
It was Zero Day, got great reviews.
Thank you.
So right out of the gate, that's not necessarily the way things, go. Did having that great review make it easier for you on the path to this book, or was like the bar set so high that it made it more challenging?
Maybe it made it easier. I had a lot of middle grade books. I wrote books for younger readers in between the two books. So when I went out with this book, it actually sold very quickly. When my agent brought it out, we did get multiple offers for it, which is always exciting. So I think having Zero Day and having had a good path with that was certainly helpful, that I had some established record as a thriller author that editors could look at and say, okay, she can do that.
Where did your love of storytelling come from?
Oh, definitely goes way back to when I was just a kid. I was the neighborhood kid who, with my best friend, we were putting on shows in our backyard and inventing plays, and I think I've just always been like that. And I always had a book in my hand. I was at the library whenever possible when I was in school, waiting for the next Judy Blume to come out is what I was doing, just sitting there, putting my name on wait lists.
Other than Judy Blume, do you remember other books that you gravitated to?
Yeah, I loved that. I loved her so much. When I got into high school, I had a big thing for Hemingway in high school. Go figure.
Wow.
I know. I loved the last line of The Sun Also Rises. Always stuck with me. Isn't it pretty to think so? The ending where people don't always get exactly what they want, and there's a little bit left open. So I feel like that's a good warning to anybody that reads my books that I love that kind of story. So yeah, I read a lot though.
You were a journalist.
Yes.
Does that background help at all in this career?
I think so. One thing that journalism, I think, really helped me get better at was I'm really good with deadlines. You throw a deadline at me, I actually work better with a deadline. I find if I have too much free time on my hands, then it's like, oh, I have time to just, kind of wander around and walk and do something different. But deadlines are great with my style of writing.
Structure.
Structure,
Having
yes.
a structured day.
Yes, absolutely. And not getting too hung up on making something perfect the first time.
Publishing is a tough business.
It is.
Getting published is tough. And there are many, many people who have that manuscript in the drawer that has never seen the light of day. What would be a good piece of advice?
To just keep writing. I have probably 4 manuscripts in the drawer. So I liken it a lot to if you want to be a doctor, right? You go to college, you go to medical school, you do a residency. You don't just one day wake up and say, I have a dream of being a doctor, and show up at an emergency room with a scalpel and they say, excellent. And I think sometimes we feel like anybody in art needs to just be naturally good at it. When I think the reality is, it's just like if you want to be a doctor, you need to study, you need to learn, you need to practice, you need to operate on the cadaver first before you're allowed into the ER. So to me, that's what my drawer novels are. They're all my practice. They're all my, practice operations. And sometimes I go back and I pick little pieces out and I go, oh, I remember that character and I think I can do something with it now. So.
All right,
practice.
so you have some that are in the drawer
Yes.
that never saw the light of day. In the 2 young adult ones, was there ever like a chapter that you went, this just isn't going to work? And
Oh,
then-
absolutely. Yes, I have files that are like the same size as the book of chapters that I pull out, and I stick them in a file in case I need them later. So definitely, there are entire chapters that just disappear. You can't be too precious about your work.
Do you use a critique partner at all?
I do. I have a couple of really good, close author friends who are wonderful that I can send my drafts to, and they will tell me, if they think it's working, if they think it's not, and they're fabulous and valuable.
How does work? Do you ever go, oh my God, they don't like that, and that was my favorite, you know?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like you don't always have to take every bit of advice that somebody gives you. They might be looking at it from a slightly different perspective, but usually if there's something that's jumped out at a critique partner, maybe it's something that does need to be tweaked or worked on. So I generally find it just very useful and helpful, and not like they're being critical. I think there's a difference between criticism and being very critical of something.
There are young adult books right now that are on a banned book hit list. As a young adult author, I'd love to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I hate to see books taken away from readers. I feel like it's important to give teenagers and anybody really access to the books that are out there. I do not support banning books for children.
I honestly, I think children have so many other distractions. I'm happy they read something.
Exactly.
The book is Dead Below Deck. Jan Gangsey, this has been so much fun. I really enjoyed the book, and I really enjoyed having you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Ann Bocock. Please join me on the next Between the Covers.